in class. Testing the difference between two means, two proportion, and two variances. Actually, class, when testing the difference between two means and two proportions and variances, we have different softwares that can be found in the internet. Mas madali lang kasi, input mo lang, automatic makukuha mo na yung value. But here in our subject, ituturo kung paano yung kukunin manually, manual computation, or the actual computation. Okay? So, once yung input mo, automatic makukuha mo na yung value. At the same time, magkukonclude ka na whether the result is you reject the hypothesis or accept the null hypothesis. Okay? Ayan. So, abot kayo doon sa inyong fourth year or third year, you have your research subject. So, you need to compare two sample means by using the experimental or control groups. Yan. For example, okay, the average lifetimes of two different fronts of bus stars might be compared to see whether there is any difference in the thread wear. Okay, so two different fronts of fertilizer must be tested to see whether one is better than the other for growing plants. Or two brands of cough syrup might be tested to see whether one brand is more effective than the other. So when we compare two means using the t-test, the researcher must decide if the two samples are independent or dependent. So this will vary, class, kung ano yung iti-test natin. If we have the sample, you need to identify first whether it falls under the independent or the dependent. Excuse me. Ayan. Ito, independent or independent. Yan. Malumanay lang ang boses ni ma'am. Ayan, para hindi masyado may pressure. So, this is where how you state your null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis. So, when we compare two groups, for example, this class, have this. Ayan. So, yung researcher daw wishes to determine whether there is a difference in the average age of nursing students who enroll in a nursing program at a community college and those who enroll in a nursing program at the university. So, dalawa yung given sa atin. The nursing program at the community college and the nursing program at the university. So, the researcher is not interested in the average age of all beginning nursing students. Instead, he is interested in comparing the two means. Take note. The two means of the two groups. Yeah. So, ito yung tanong niya. So, does the mean age of nursing students who enroll at the community college differ from the mean age of nursing students who enroll at the university? So, this is now, class, your null hypothesis. You always state. Yan. Palaging ganito, class, ha? Hide ko. Yan. The first, yung HO natin, or H0, this is the null hypothesis. So, we always state that there is no significant difference between the means of the two community. And the alternative hypothesis, or the H1, is the mean difference, or the mean age of the beginning nursing students at the university, or versus the community college is not equal to, and not equal to. So, this will fall under two-tailed test. Okay? Yan. So, this is the mean age of the beginning nursing students at the community college. Electric fan lang pa. Maingay ba plus yung electric fan? Di ba? Nararinig niyo? Di naman. Okay.
Di man ako lang.
Okay, thank you. So, we have the second mean. So, from the first mean, we have the community college. The second is the mean of all age beginning nursing students at the university. So, take note, if we have this null and the alternative hypothesis, we can also express this into this one. So, the mean difference of the two groups is equal to 0, and that is always the null hypothesis. Excuse me. And the alternative hypothesis, given yung problem. So the difference of the two, the mean age of the community college and the university is not equal to 0. So this one is an example on how you express your null and alternative hypothesis in a given group. Okay, so if there is no difference in the population means, so subtracting them will give a difference of 0. Excuse me. Okay. If there are difference, subtracting will give a number other than 0. So both methods of stating hypothesis are correct. So this one class is considered correct when you are stating your hypothesis, and also this one. We can express this on like in the first one, or in letter A, or in letter B. So what are the assumptions for the test to determine the difference between two means? So then take note the assumptions that that are needed to be considered. First is the sample must be independent of each other. So there can be no relationship between the subjects in each sample. Number 2, the standard deviation of both population must be known. If the sample size are less than 30, the population must be normally or approximately normally distributed. So, kaya class kadalasan may tinatawag na normality test. Tinatawag siyang if it falls under the normal test, normally distributed, pag pumasa siya doon, saka mo pa lang siya ito-test. Okay? Different programs use this. Shapiro, Wilcon, tama ba? Wilkins, basta Shapiro kalimutan ko class yung kasunod doon. Basta normality test wherein if the given data falls under the normal data, then you can already directly solve for the t-test. While if the problem or the samples doesn't fall on a normally distributed samples, normally distributed, you will transform now the data. So, may tinatawag na transformation of data. Okay? So, dito lang muna tayo sa assumption natin na normally distributed. Okay? And so, this is now the general formula in finding or your z-test when we compare two means from an independent population. So, you just need to subtract the observed difference. And this is the observed difference. And the expected difference. Yan. Ito ba, class, in-state mo sa hypothesis mo that this is always equal to 0. Yan. This is now your standard deviation, okay, over the number of data. So when we test in a hypothesis testing situation, when we compare means, so the first one, the difference is not significant. So, yan. The sample 1, the sample 2, given sa atin, yung population natin, this is equal. Not the population, but the mean is equal from the sample 1 to sample 2. So, we do not reject HO. And another one, the difference is significant, so we automatically reject the HO. So some of the researchers, as usually, hire statistician so that hindi na sila mamumroblema pagdating dito. But here in our subject, since we have engineering data analysis, we need to perform this. Okay. And so this is now the basic format for hypothesis testing. So we will use the traditional method. Okay. So first one, you need to state the hypothesis. What is your claim? You need to identify your claim. Sabihin natin, baka may bongbong dito sa example ko pa naman yung wag mo lang. Okay, so for example, find the mean score of the students in an exam of thermodynamics, for example, block A and block B. Compare natin yung means nila. So, what is now your null hypothesis? So, the mean difference between the scores from block A versus block B is equal to 0. While your alternative hypothesis, ayan, sulat ko na lang dito para mas makita. Yung HO nyo, yung mean score ng block A sa exam. So, compare natin kung din mas taas yung score with A or B, block B. This is now your hypothesis and yung claim natin. Ayan. This is now your claim. So, hindi equal. Ayan. Pang 2B. Ayan. So, in finding the critical values, we make use of the different tables or the table F, E, F, G, H. So, mamaya papakita ko anong table. We need to compute the test value and we will make a decision as well as we need to summarize the result. Ayan. For example, ayan. Survey found that the average hotel room rate in New Orleans is 88.42 and the average room rate in Phoenix is 80.62. So, assume that data were obtained from two samples of 50 hotels each and the standard deviations of the populations are given 5.62 and 4.83 respectively. Okay. At given alpha, excuse me, we are given at 0.05. So, itong 0.05, gagamitin natin yan sa table. Okay. Can it be concluded that there is a significant difference in the rates? So, first, we need to state the hypothesis. So, the mean, yan, or the average room rate in the first hotel. Ayan. Hala. Ayan. So, that is not equal to, equal. Palagi yung class ha. In stating your null hypothesis that is all equal or there is no significant difference. But in the alternative hypothesis, the claim now, the mean or the average hotel room rates in the first one is not equal to the second one. And so, yun ang claim natin. Kasi, the given problem here is, can it be concluded that there is a significant difference in the rates? Yeah. So, in finding the critical value, so, paano mo ito mahanap na critical values natin? Using the table in the z-test. Okay? So, since alpha natin is 0.05, and the critical values, ayan, makuhanap natin to class. Di ba nakuha nyo na to in your first hypothesis testing? Ito class, dalawa na. Dati isa-isa lang yung pinapatest ko sa inyo. Sa hypothesis testing ngayon, dalawang data na. So, babalik ka ulit dun sa table, kukunin mo lahat yung mga critical values na given sa atin, alpha lang, the 0.05. So, this is now the critical values. Ibig sabihin, these portions are the rejection unit. Bakit importante yan when it comes to your conclusion or results? Yan. Concluded if you will reject or accept the hypothesis. So, computing for the test value, we have now the c-test. Ito ka 0 kasi ito yung assumption mo. But since in the problem, it was given the mean 88.42 minus 80.61. The standard deviation is given. And the total population or the total samples is given. nakakalimutan. So this is now 7.45. That is now your test value. Ano yung decision mo? Okay. When your z computed value, excuse me, ayan, dito, test value is greater than the given critical values. And 1.96. This is now your CV. So, itong 7.45, balik ka dun sa normal distribution. This is now your 7.45. So, it falls under the rejection area. Ayan. So, we will now make the decision. So, we reject the null hypothesis at a given alpha, which is 0.05. Since the computed value is greater than since the computed or the test value is greater than the critical value. So, to furtherly understand this, yan, i-draw nyo ulit class yung standard normal distribution natin para mas maintindihan. So, this clear line class is the from negative 1.96 to positive 1.6. This is now the do not reject. Yan. Pag nag-fall dito, yung z-test value natin. This is now do not, yan, boring ng sulat ko. Do not reject. Yan, dito. Sabihin, di mo reject yung null hypothesis natin. So, since it falls, so automatically we reject the null hypothesis. So, ano na yung magiging conclusion mo, or how do you express your results now? Or interpret your results. So, ito na kasi yung kung ano mo. There is enough evidence to support the claim that the means are not equal. Ayan. So, not equal. Why? Because we rejected this one. Reject na natin siya. Equal yon. Automatically, tama yung, assuming na tama yung claim natin. So, this is now, after furtherly testing the samples, so evidence to support the claim that the means are not equal to 0. Bakit class? Kasi pag yung alternative, null hypothesis natin can be expressed. Excuse me. The difference is equal to 0. Ayan. Ito yung class. Ito, pwede mo itong ma-state yung null hypothesis natin. Like that. Okay. So, there is a significant difference in terms of, ayan. So, dito lang kayo mahihirapan sa step 4. Actually, madali lang if you have properly computed for the test. Okay? Okay, but raise your hands if you do understand. Ay, wala. Nakikinig kayo, ma'am. Ayan. Okay. Ayan. So, that is now an example of the testing. Well, another, kung ito class, z-test, we can also make use of this method, the p-value method. Okay? So, we need to state the hypothesis and I also identify. Paras lang siya class. Pero, pinagkaiba nyo lang sa step 3, we need to find the p-value. Ano tong p-value? Balik-balik na tayo nito sa p-value. Okay, so proceed. So, given sa atin yung data. Okay, hindi ko na babasahin. We have the males and females. So, average number of sports that the colleges offer for males is greater than. Take note, ito class is stated sa problem, greater than. So, this is now the claim. And pag tinanong lang sa atin class, is there is a significant difference that is always equal to. But here in the problem, it was stated that it is greater than the average number of sports that the colleges offer for females. So, in a class, given sa atin yung data. So, you always state the hypothesis, that is the null hypothesis, that the mean or the average number of sports that colleges offer for males is just equal to the number of is equal to the average number of sports that colleges offer for females. While the claim here now, or the alternative hypothesis, is that the mean is just greater than the average number of sports that colleges offer for females. So, in computing for the t-test value, ayan. So, ito class, compute mo muna kasi ang given sa atin is to raw data. Ito. From males to females. So, yan class yung magiging data set natin. Find the mean and yes, the mean for the males and the females, as well as the standard deviation. May calculator kayo class, so you can make use of that. And after that, computing for the test value, z-test pa rin class, but we will be using inuna dito class. Excuse me. Kung kanina class sa literal na traditional z-tests method, the first or the second step is hahanapin natin na yung critical value as the given of alpha. Dito class, we need to compute first for the z-test value. Ayan. Ito na, 1.06. Yung step 3 natin dito, hahanapan na natin siya ng p-value. Ayan. Ano yung p-value natin? For the given z-test, nakuha na natin yung z. Ayan. 1.06. The area now is 0.8854. Ma'am, paano ito nakuha? Punta ka doon sa table natin. Naalala nyo yung class? Hanapin mo yung area. Ito yung magiging area niya. Bakit? Doon ba class sa left? Ang reference niya palagi dun is the left tail. So from here to there, yun yung p-value na area natin. Given sa atin is 0.8554. But take note, since this is a right-tailed test, ayan, dito na kayo malilito. Right-tailed test to class. In a right-tailed test, you need to subtract. Bakit 1? Ulitin ko ulit because the assumption, the area of the standard normal of a normally distributed is 1. So minus of that, so this is now 0.01146. Okay. And the p-value now is 0.446. Ito pala siya class, nakasobra yun. So hanggang dito lang yun class. Okay, so that is now the p-value. Dito. Sa p-value naman class, take note, ang palaging basihan natin is the alpha. Ayan. Yung alpha natin, given sa problem, is 0.1. Pag p-value class, ang i-comparean mo, ang given sa iyo is your alpha. Okay? So, pag ang p-value larger than the alpha, sabihin, do not reject the null hypothesis. Take note, ito yung alpha natin na 0.10. Since this is a right-tailed test, this is the rejection unit, shaded part, and etong clear na to class is do not reject the null hypothesis. So, na-compute natin na p-value, it doesn't fall under the rejection region. So, this is now, so the decision now is to reject the null hypothesis. Okay? Inuulit-ulit ko lang to, class. When it comes to p-value, okay, you do not reject the null hypothesis. After that, you need to summarize the results now. So, there is not enough evidence to support the claim that the colleges offer more sports for females than they do for males than they do for females. Yeah. So, this is now, syempre madali pag mag-compute ka ng mean, median mode, mean, and the standard deviation that is needed in the problem. Okay? Naintindihan ba? Raise your hands. Wala. Okay. Tatlo lang. Ayan. So, actually, class, madali lang to kasi you can check your answers by using the different softwares. Yung ginagamit ko, class, is the RStudio in checking your in checking your the values in Z-test. Okay? And the traditional P value. Ayan. So actually, the researcher is interested in testing a specific difference in means other than zero. So, ito class kadalasan yung kino-consider pag given sa atin yung value. For example, he or she might hypothesize that the nursing students at the community colleges are, on average, 3.2 years older than those at the university. So, ito yung magiging hypothesis mo. Hindi naman palagi zero lang, class. So, pwede naman ganito, class. Yung null hypothesis mo, and this one, the difference between the two means is equal to 3.2, and the difference of the two means is greater than 3.2. So we have now the formula in Z-test. Okay. So the Z-test now is the difference between the mean. Ito class, gamitin nyo lang to. Dali lang naman. So, yung differences ng means natin is the hypothesized difference or expected value. Yan, so 3.2 siya. Ito naman kasi yung confident intervals natin for the difference between two means can be also found. When you are hypothesizing a difference of 0, if the confidence interval contains 0, the null hypothesis is not rejected, while if the confidence interval does not contain 0, the null hypothesis is rejected. Yan. Ito class, so the general formula, we can make use of the Z confidence interval for the difference of the means. And proper substitution lang to class. The first example natin. Ayan. So, ito class yung magiging confidence interval natin between the means for the data in the previous example. So, given sa atin yung 95% confidence interval. Ayan. So, proper substitution. This is now the difference between the means of the two minus the Z value. Ano yung alpha 2 natin? That is now given the table. Okay. Just need to subtract properly. Minus dito sa kabila, plus dito sa kabila. Simplifying. Ito na class yung magiging value niya. Bakit kailangan to? Kasi para makita nyo kung saan siya nag-fall, or without using the table, makukuha natin kung ano yung difference if given lang natin yung mean difference between the difference. Okay? So since the confidence interval does not contain 0, the decision is to reject the null hypothesis, which agrees to the previous result. Ayan. Double check to class. Madami kang pwedeng gawin para makapag-double check lang yung statistics data. Ayan. So, proceed. If we have the z-test, we can make use also of the t-test. Okay? Anong pinagkaiba ng z-test sa t-test? Now, yung kanina, standard deviation, now we'll make use of the sample standard deviation, where the degree of freedom now are equal to or smaller of n minus 1 or n. Yes. Ayan. So, ito na yung magiging formula, general formula natin. Excuse me, class. Okay, proceed now. So, kasi madali lang talaga naman to class. Nahihirapan lang kayo mag-absorb kasi may mga formula, but when you are solving it, nasa puso mo naman, madali lang to. So, open naman yung tables, given naman sa atin lahat. Masisolve natin yung t-test. Okay? Pinagkaiba ng z-test, t-test, yung denominator natin, ito na. The standard error of difference between the two means. So, this is mathematically the derivation of the standard error is somewhat complicated. Ayan, now omitted siya dito. Ayan, given sa atin yung data, the average size of a farm in Indiana country, Pennsylvania, in a 191. The average size of a farm in Green Country, Pennsylvania is 199. So, we assume that the data were obtained from the two samples with the standard deviation. So, this is now the sample standard deviation given sa atin. So, we will make use of the t-test. Okay? T-test yung gagamitin natin. So, given sa atin yung standard deviation of 38 and 12, the sample sizes of 8 and 10. Bakit? Kailangan na natin tong for the degree of freedom. Okay. So, can it be concluded that the alpha now is equal to 0.05? That the average size of the two farms, average size of farms in the two countries is different. So, we assume that the populations are normally distributed. Ayan. So, first, we need to state the hypothesis. So, alam na natin po. Ayan na, dapat wala nang magkakamali when it comes to stating your null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis. So, walang sinabi dito greater than or less than, so automatically, this before the two-tailed test. So, that is now your claim. Bakit class two-tailed test? Yan. Kasi sa rejection unit, we have this. Ayan, two-tailed bagay yung class. Both sides of the standard norm are the normally distributed. Standard normal distribution. So, we have the both sides may rejection region. Okay? So, in finding the critical value, since this is a t-test now class, ayan, two-tailed test, kasi doon class sa table na makikita nyo, may ginagamit yung t-test natin. Tatanungin ka doon sa taas kung one-tailed ba siya, one-tailed, two-tailed. Ano yung alpha mo? Hanapin mo doon sa table. So, given sa'yo 0.05. Pupunta ka doon sa two-tailed at the same time 0.05. Yan. First, punta ka doon sa two-tailed test, punta sa alpha. After that, yung degree of freedom, pababa na. DF. The degree of freedom, pababa yon. So, kung saan sila nag-meet, That is now your value. Test value. Okay? Or yung critical values natin. So, ayan, since the variances are unequal, the degree of freedom now are the smaller of n1 minus 1 or n2 minus 1. So, in this case, the degree of freedom are, so 8 minus 1 is 7. Hence, from the critical table now, pupunta ka na doon. Sabi ko, yung degree of freedom natin is 7 given alpha. So, makukuha natin to. We have the, excuse me, the negative of that, negative, positive, critical values, and the negative 2.365. In computing for the test value, given na sa atin yung sample mean or the average mean, minus the 0, that is now the computed. I mean, we stated in the problem, that is the null hypothesis. Ito yan, class. Pag dinerive natin to, or we can make use, sabi ko baga, you can make use of this one and this one. The difference of the two means of the samples is equal to 0. Yan. So we can now proceed given sa atin sa problem and the sample data. Sample standard deviation, the sample that, the number of sample, excuse me. And we have the second sample standard deviation and the sample number in second sample, okay, the total number of samples. So this is now the test value natin. So in making the decision now, class, so this is now the, excuse me, nasaan na nawawala class na ito. So this is now the test value. So we have the negative of that, negative 0.57. Sabi ko nga, when it's clear, this is now your do not reject region. And this is the rejection unit. Rejection, yung shaded part, class, this is the rejection. So since from this table or from this diagram figure, we can see that the negative 0.57 doesn't fall on the rejection unit. So our conclusion now on the interpretation of this is there is not enough kasi evidence to support the claim that the average size of the farms is different. Yeah. So do not reject the HO. Wala tayong evidence na nagsasabi na ay mas malaki pala, okay, or equal yung the mean average size of the farm. Yeah. So not enough evidence, so do not reject yung magiging hypothesis natin. I mean, conclusion. Okay? Naintindihan ba? May question? Sige. So this is now the t-test. That is now your t-test. Ano na yung test natin? We have the z-test, the p-value test, using the p-value, and then this one is the t-test. Okay. Ito naman, class, we have the, excuse me, the confidence intervals that is found for the difference between the two means. Sabi ko nga, this is just proper substitution. Okay. Ayan. Masakit na. Okay. So, proper substitution, we will make use of the t-test value. Ayan. Hala. And we have now the difference of that. So, pinapakita lang dito, class, kung nag-fall ba yung value natin. So, 0 baga to. Since 0 is contained in the interval. Yan. Di ba ito yung assumption natin, 0 siya. The decision is to not reject the null hypothesis. Di ba? Hindi natin to i-reject. Ayan. So, another test class is the t-test. May two different options for the use of t-test. One option is used when the variances of the population are not equal, and the other option is used when the variances are equal. Ayan. So, to determine two sample variances are equal, the researcher can use f-test. Ayan. Ito class yung kadalasan ginagamit ng mga researcher natin. Hey. Ayan. Excuse me. So, we can make use of this formula. Haba-haba yan, class. So, we have now the test value. So, ano lang pinalitan yung denominator lang natin, class. Kasi, second test, statistics yan. So, madami ng variance dito, class. So, tinatawag tong pooled estimate of the variance. And for the numerator, the terms are the same as in the previous given formula. However, a notable explanation is needed for the denominator of the second test, statistics. Yan. Since both population are assumed to have the same variance, yan, yun yung palagi mong isipin ha, yung variance mo pag not equal siya, and the other option where your variances are equal. Okay? The standard error is computed but with what is called the pooled estimate of variance. Ayan. A pooled estimate of variance, ano yun, class? That is a weighted average. Ayan. A variance using two sample variances and the degrees of freedom of each variances. Ayan. Ayan. Omitted na dito yung standard error. Ayan. Mahirap. Alam muna natin. So, yung makalipas class, that is how you treat or you process your statistical tool given sa atin independent. While here is, we need to test the difference between the two means when it comes to given sa atin dependent samples. Yan. Kung dependent samples na class, we have now the specialty test for dependent means. Yan. So, paano mo mako-consider kung dependent siya? Syempre class, dapat alam niyo yun. Kung dependent ba siya or independent. So, yung expression lang dito, class, this is now the mean of the difference. Ayan. Ayan, mahaba-habang formula. But ito, class, yung ginagamit. When it falls under the dependent samples given sa atin. Ayan. Ito, class, this is a basic example of dependent samples because this is now the before and after. Ayan. Ayan. This is a physical education director claims by taking special vitamin, a weightlifter can increase his strength. 8 athletes are selected to give a test of strength. This is the standard bench press. After 2 weeks of regular training supplemented with the vitamin, they are tested again. So we need to test the effectiveness of the vitamin at given alpha 0.05. Excuse me. And each value in this data represents the maximum number of pounds that the athlete can bench press. So we always assume that the variable is approximately normally distributed. Yeah. So this is now the data. Okay. We have now the data. Excuse me. So, ano yung claim mo? I mean, the null hypothesis class is the mean difference of the two, the before and after, is always equal to 0, while your claim now is less than. Okay? Kasi yun yung sinasabi dito. Excuse me. Yun yung gusto nating patunayan. Less than 0. So, hanapin muna natin yung sa table, yung degree of freedom natin. Since sa sample is 8 minus 1, we have 7. And this will fall under the left-tail test with an alpha of 0.05. So, ito na yung value. Sa table to, class, ha? So, in computing for the test value, we have the difference between the two samples, the before and after. After that, you have to sum up, summation, and this is now your standard deviation of differences. Compute pa rin siya as 4.3. So, the difference now, the mean difference, minus your assumption in the problem, which is always equal to 0, divided by the standard deviation computed over the total number of samples, which is 8. So, we have now the test value, and ito yung class 1.388 negative. And, but our test value or the critical value is negative 1895. This is the rejection unit. After that, we have now the negative. Alam naman natin greater than yung negative 1.388. Ayan. Sakit ang mo. Okay, so take note now. The decision now is not to reject. Sabi ko, ulit-ulitin ko. This is pag nalinis yan. This is the do not reject. Ayan. And this, the shaded portion is the rejection unit. Amen. So we have not enough evidence to support the claim that the vitamin increases. Diba, class? We have no evidence, so yung vitamin natin nag-increase. Increases the strength of the weightlifters. So, ganun siya kasi coconnect mo yung rejection natin or acceptance ng HO natin dito sa problem. Ayan. So, this is now the general formula of the test for dependent samples. Ayan. Pinakita ko lang kung paano mo siya makukuha. And also the confidence interval, proper substitution, makukuha mo. Ito class, nagpo-fall baga class yung 0 dito. So, sa confidence interval naman class, the decision is to not reject the null hypothesis. So, we can check that by using these formulas. Ayan. So, next now, we have to test the difference between proportions. Alam naman natin yung proportion class, that is the number of units. I mean, yung proportion natin, which is equal to number of the units that possess the characteristic of interest over the sample size. So, when testing proportion class, we always state that there is no difference between the proportions. So, ito most likely, we can make use of this null hypothesis, stating your null hypothesis as well as these two, the alternative hypothesis. And similar statement using less than or greater than in the alternative hypothesis can be formed for one-tailed test. Pwede yun, class. Okay. Ayan. Excuse me. So, we have also the variances of the proportions. Kaya nagkakaroon na tong the PQ. Ayan. The weighted estimate of B can be computed by using the formula. Given natin to. And we have the Q. This is now 1 minus the P. So, makukuha na natin ito. And, kita ko lang yung process on deriving, but ito lang naman class yung ginagamit in z-test when we compare two proportions. Ayan. Paras lang naman class. Sa denominator lang tayo nag-iiba. This is the stated excuse me, the stated proportion. And this is the general formula of the denominator. Ayan. Excuse me. Apo. Ayan. So, proportion 1. Para mas maintindihan. So, in the nursing home study mentioned in the chapter, Opening Statistics today, the researchers found that 12 out of 34 small nursing homes had a resident vaccination rate of less than 80%, while 17 out of 24 large nursing homes had a vaccination rate of less than 80%. So, given sa atin yung alpha, which is 0.05, we need to test the claim there is no difference in the proportion of small and large nursing homes, with a resident vaccination rate of less than 80%. So, let natin yung proportion P1 and the proportion of small nursing homes with a vaccination rate of less than 80%, while yung pangalawa, we have the proportion of the large nursing home with a vaccination rate of less than 80%. So, paano natin makukuha to? So, the number of, excuse me, the first number, we have the data natin, 12 out of 34. So, ito na yung proportion natin, 0.35. And the second proportion is 17 out of 24. We have 0.71. Finding for the P-bar. And the P-bar now, we have 0.5 as well as the Q-bar. So, we have 0.5. So, 0.5, 0.5 sila class. First, we need to state the hypothesis. Alam na natin that the null hypothesis is always there is no significant difference between the two proportions, and the alternative hypothesis now is not equal to. Ayan. Pero yung claim niya dito sa test the claim if there is no significant difference. Yun yung claim natin. Ito yung claim. So, finding the critical value, ayan, z-test pa rin ka sa critical values natin. Hindi ito nagbabago class. Yung alpha natin, I mean, yung critical value pag ang alpha is 0.05 when it comes to z-test. Since this is a proportion, ito yung gagamitin na formula natin. Okay? Kasi given sa atin yung mga proportions class. Excuse me. So, we have the negative of that. So, we make the decision. We always reject the null hypothesis. Why? Because ito class. Since the critical value is negative 1.96 and it falls under the rejection unit, we always reject now yung negative 2.7 natin. Na-computed natin or the test value pala. Ito class. Test value natin. We reject the null hypothesis kasi nagpo-fall siya dun sa rejection unit natin. So, reject now the hypothesis. So, there is now an evidence or enough evidence to reject the claim that there is no difference in the proportion of small and large nursing homes with a resident vaccination rate of less than 80%. So, in a problem, makikita mo kasi if the problem, excuse me, falls under the proportions. Okay? Ala. Naiintindihan pa ba si ma'am? Raise your hands there. May nakikinig to ba? Wala na. Ayan. Thank you. So, excuse me. So, ito naman class na confidence interval. Ulit-ulit na ako dito. Pero, given sa atin yung general formula, just need to subtract, okay? and add kung ayaw mo na mag-solve no ng hypothesis. Pero, mas madali yun, class. Pang double check lang to. Okay? Solve ka ulit ng proportion. After that, titingnan mo, this is now the interval. So, since wala naman dito class, di ba yung assumption natin, yung sa null hypothesis natin, that the difference between the two proportions is equal to 0. So, negative 0.62 to negative 0.08, malayo pa siya sa 0. So, automatically, since 0 is not contained in the interval, ito class, yung interval natin from 0.62, negative 0.62 to 0.0018. Negative yan pareha. So, the decision is to reject the null hypothesis. And so, yung alternative hypothesis, I mean the null hypothesis natin na the proportions is equal to. Okay? So, that is on how do we test or double check if the decision is right or wrong. Okay? If we reject or do not reject the given null hypothesis. And next, we have the testing the difference between two variances. Ayan. Ano yung characteristic ng F distribution natin? We have the values of F cannot be negative because variances are always positive for 0. The distribution is positively skewed. The mean value of F is approximately equal to 1. The F distribution is a family of curves based on the degree of freedoms of the variances of the numerator and the degrees of freedom of the variance of the denominator. So we have the formula of F test. Ayan. Larger. Two variances na to class. Ayan. Ito class yung sabi ko pa, paano ka kukuha sa table natin. Okay. Find the critical value for a right-tailed test, F test, when the alpha is 0.05 and the degree of freedom for the numerator are 15 and the degrees of freedom for the denominator is 21. So we have two tables, class. Ito yung general table. Hahanapin mo muna sa general table if the alpha, kasi may mga alpha 0.01. Ayan, 0.1. 0.05. Meron din pang 0.10. Ayan. So, madami yan. Kasi hahanapin mo yun sa table. We have different pages kung saan ka mag-fall. Since given sa atin yung alpha natin 0.05, hanapin mo yung degree of freedom ng first natin. And degree of freedom numerator sa taas class and degree of freedom sa denominator. Kung saan sila meet, you have now the value 2.18. So that is now your critical value. Okay? So when you are testing the equality of two proportions, two variances, we have this hypothesis. So ulit-ulit lang to class, the right-tailed, the left-tailed, and the two-tailed. Pero variances na tayo, have variances. Kanina, when we make use of the F test, the T test, the Z test, for proportions, given two different means, we always make use of the mean. Okay? So, this is the notes and the assumption of testing the variances. So, ulitin ko lang, ganun pa rin yung gagawin mo from step 1 to step 5. Para tayo. Mas madali lang tong F-test natin. Okay, so a medical researcher wishes to see whether the variances of the heart, excuse me, wait lang class. Nawala ako. Okay, madali na class. So, tara. Variances, pag given sa atin yung variances class, mas madali nga yung formula. In beats per minute. So, smokers is different from the variance of heart rates of people who do not smoke. So, two samples are selected and the data are shown. So, when we use of the alpha given problem, which is 0.05, is there enough evidence to support the claim? So, given sa atin yung sample, the smokers and the non-smokers. You have down the variances, the sample variances. Okay? And now the variances given sa atin. We need to state the hypothesis and identify the claim. First one, equal yung null hypothesis natin, or there is no significant difference between the two variances. And the second one, or yung claim natin, there is a difference between the two variances, or the first one differs or is not equal to the second one. Okay? Finding the critical values. Ayan. Excuse me. So, using the 0.025 table, bakit 0.025? Kasi class, this is a two-tailed test. Ayan. Tama ako. Ayan. Alpha natin 0.05. Two-tailed, i-divide mo siya sa 2. Ito yung gagamitin mo. 0.05. So, yung degree of freedom natin sa numerator, 26 minus 1, yan, 25. The degree of freedom natin sa denominator, we have 18 minus 1, we have 17. So, the critical value now is, excuse me, 2.56. Ayan, ginamit daw dun sa table is 24. Anyway, iba-iba naman class yung table. So, tuturuan ko na lang kayo na. Later, may table dito nakasunod. So, we may compute now the test value given sa atin. We have 3.6. In making the decision, alam naman natin na 3.6 is greater than 2.6. Diba? Dito yan. Wala si ma'am. Yan. Dito yan, class. So, 3.6. So, it will fall now to the rejection unit or rejected region. Reject the null hypothesis. So, there is enough evidence to support the claim that the variances of the heart rates of smokers and non-smoker is different. Ayan. Reject natin kasi ang null hypothesis na there is no significant difference. So, yung claim natin, tama. So, there is a difference. Another example. So, same lang naman yung case natin, but here, it was stated that is greater than the standard deviation. Ayan. So, this is now your claim. First claim, equal to, or there is no significant difference. So, the claim now, the alternative hypothesis, is that the variance is greater than, or the standard deviation is greater than in the first hospital than the standard deviation of the waiting time in the second hospital. Okay? So, punta ulit kayo sa table. 16 minus 1, 15. The denominator, 18 minus 1, 17. 0.01 yung alpha natin. Wala bang given na alpha? Ayan. Pero ang ginamit natin is 0.01. Ayan. So, the critical value is 3.31. We compute that. 32 divided by 28 squared, we have 1.31. Since 1.31 is less than, hindi siya greater than, nag-dreno mo yun na sa variances. Yung 1.31 natin, andito. And this is your 3.31. So, rejection unit doon. So, we conclude now that there is not enough evidence to support the claim. The standard deviation of the waiting times of the first hospital is greater than the standard deviation of the waiting times of the second hospital. Take note, sabi ko, pag wala doon sa rejection unit, automatically do not reject the null hypothesis. Ayan. So, this is now the formulas that are usually used when testing the difference between two means. We can make use of the z-test, the population, the comparing two means also from an independent samples. variances are not equal, t-test. And we have the comparing two means pag sinabing dependent yung samples natin. And we have also the c-test for comparing two proportion. And last but not the least, the f-test when we compare two variances. So, yun kasi yung gagamitin natin when we compare two variances and proportion t-test. Ayan. Yung confidence intervals is just to check whether you can automatically to double check your answer if you are going to reject or to do not reject the hypothesis. Ayan. Ayan. So we have now, this is now the distribution, the f-test. This is the sample of the t-test. I mean, yung sa f natin when we compute for the test value. Ayan. Ito kasi, dito kasi pag-iiba. Hanapin mo dito, 0.05, 0.01, 0.025, and 0.05. Diyan pas nag-iiba. And degree of freedom of the numerator and the degree of freedom of the denominator. Ayan. So, okay. So, this is the tables that are used in testing the hypothesis. So, yun lang fast. May question pa ba? Discard natin. Siyempre, wala pa kasi wala pang pinibigay si ma'am na activity. Napasa nyo na class yung activity ko sa ibang subject. Okay? So, when we are testing two means, two proportion, and two variances, ang palagi yung isiping test if independent or dependent sample ba siya. After that, always assume, kasi basic na lang tayong statistics, hindi tayo yung highfalutin. So, kasi when it comes to statisticians, they usually test the data if it falls under the normality test. Okay? So we always assume here in our subject that the data is normally distributed. Okay? Kasi tinitest pa yan kung normal ba yung samples natin. Okay? Two means, two proportion. Identify first if it falls under independent or dependent samples. After that, we can now state the hypothesis and identify the claim. Second, kung ano yung minsan nauuna yung pag-compute natin ng test value, or yung sa iba, we make use of the critical value first. So, nag-iiba-iba if what process or method we will use in your research. Okay? So, for now, yun muna. We have the z-test, t-test, z-test for proportion, the f-test, when the variances are not equal, or given sa atin yung mga variances. Okay? So, may question pa? Anyone? Sige nga, kung naintindihan. Raise your hands if you do understand. Po. Ay, wow, naintindihan lahat. Siyempre, pang ilan nyo na tong statistics. Sige, kung walang question, I will stop presenting. Yan. Lahat naman ng raise ng hand, di ba? Sige, pag may question, private message. Okay? Sige, can I